All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Fandom from Afar. I am back after a little bit of a break. I was actually at a conference last week, so my voice may sound a little hoarse. I feel like I was yelling the entire time, but it was so great. It was a podcast conference, and it was just so fun to be surrounded by other podcasters who just love the creative side of sharing their story and making a podcast. So it was really encouraging and just really fun to hear people's stories and kind of their journey of how they started doing their pod. And I just loved it. So if you're listening to this, I hope this is not the only podcast that you listen to. There's so many good ones out there, and I hope that you've found some. If you have a hard time finding podcasts for a subject that you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help you find something that you just have a good time listening to, and that'll help support the person who's creating it. So yay, podcasts. Let's do a Nuggets check-in. They've just finished up a 5-game road trip, and they went 3-2, which is fine. That's pretty much what we expected. But I wanted to focus on 3 of the games, and it's not just the 3 wins. I wanted to focus on kind of the 3 bigger games, which would be the loss in Philadelphia, the loss in New York, and then the win in Boston. So the loss in Philadelphia obviously hurts. I kind of take on the Nuggets side when there's a big Nuggets and Philly rivalry, and that is mainly due to the Jokić versus Embiid rivalry. So the game was hyped up. It was a good game. Both teams, I think, played pretty well. The Nuggets just kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter, and Embiid truly was amazing. He was taking mid-range jump shots, three-pointers. He was just making everything. So hats off to him. He really, really played well, and it was an impressive win. I can't say really anything except that they outplayed the Nuggets that night, and they were the better team. Now, that was not the case for the loss in New York. You could tell the Nuggets were at the very end of a road trip. You could tell maybe that they had a night before where maybe they had a little bit of time to go out and enjoy the nightlife in New York. And that's not surprising. They are early 20-year-old millionaires who are in the city that has the best clubs in the world. So part of me doesn't blame them, but at the same time, it was a joke of a game. They put forth zero effort, except for Jokić. He looked good. He was trying, but the other guys, they just were not with him, and it was frustrating to watch, but it was pretty clear early on what was happening, and so I think I just turned it off and watched a show with my kids or something, because it was clearly not going to be a good basketball game. What was a good basketball game was the game when the Nuggets took on Boston. Boston was undefeated at home. They were 20-0. And this was fun because it really was treated like a playoff game for both teams. It was kind of exciting to see the Nuggets turn it on and show that they still had it. And Boston, they've been amazing this year. Their talent fits really well together. They're extremely deep. It could have been a finals preview. And if that is a finals matchup, that would be so fun to watch, just because the two teams do kind of match up well with each other. And it was a great game. Jokić and Murray kind of did their 2-man game down the end, and Boston went cold, which I think a big part of that was when the Nuggets lock in on defense, they're great. They have length. They got intelligent playmakers. So it would be such a fun matchup to watch, Boston versus Denver. And it was really the key game of the road trip for me. I would have loved to have won the Philadelphia game, and obviously New York has been playing extremely well since they traded for OG Anunoby. But I don't know, that Boston game, they've kind of been the cream of the crop in the NBA, and it was just nice to see the Nuggets step up their game to match and obviously beat the best team in the NBA this season. So to be honest, no matter what happens the rest of the season, barring injury, of course, the fact that the Nuggets did that on the road in Boston, I'm going to be pretty confident going into the playoffs with the Nuggets. We've talked extensively about how the Nuggets looked terrible the last month of the season and then went in the playoffs, turned on the switch, and won the championship. So I guess it was a good reminder game, and it's just I will have that confidence no matter what happens the rest of the season that the Nuggets still can flip the switch and be an elite team when it's needed. And then last night, I'm recording this on Sunday, so Saturday night, the Nuggets had a huge game against Philadelphia. It was the rematch. We lost the game in Philly about 10 days ago, and now Philly was coming to Denver. And obviously, it's billed as rivalry week on ABC and ESPN. They've been specifically scheduling matchups to just have some hype around some regular season games. And obviously, Jokić versus Embiid, it doesn't get any bigger than that. They're the two best players in the NBA. They've won the last 3 MVPs. Yeah, they were hyping this game up like crazy, and it was supposed to be great. And it was a total letdown. Now, this obviously happened because at the last minute, Embiid said he wasn't playing. Philadelphia also said that Maxey and Harris and just really they rested all their guys, whether through injury or sickness, or we'll go over what we think Embiid's case was, but just a letdown. You could feel it in the building. The Nuggets were let down. The fans were let down. Even the announcers were let down. You could tell they had so many talking points that they had gotten ready, and the TV crew had some graphics ready, just talking about what a big matchup it was. And it should have been a great game, but it was not meant to be. And yeah, the Nuggets won, but it was pretty much a joke of a game. The Nuggets went through the motions. They beat Philadelphia's bench players, and it's just, I think it speaks to a bigger problem that the NBA has, and obviously specific players are a big part of that. But the NBA tried to set up a week where there would be big games and people would get excited about it. And there's been some great games, and I'm sure they've been fine, but like the Denver versus Philly game to match up the best 2 players in the league was kind of really the key one. They had it at their afternoon spot on Saturday so that everybody could see, and they wanted to make it a big deal, having the best 2 players go against each other, and whether it's for MVP this year or just kind of bragging rights for the rest of the season, but it was supposed to be such a big deal, and it just did not happen. And it's rough. The NBA regular season has so many games, and you would hope that some are great. And obviously, we had an episode a couple weeks ago where the Nuggets and Warriors game ended up being amazing. And I was just talking about that's why you are a fan. Like, that's why you want to stay up late to watch those games, because you get those moments. But the random ones are so much fun, but you should be able to look forward to a game because of the matchup, and it may not be great, but you would hope there's at least a chance for it to be great. And it just gets taken away from fans so often just because players don't want to play or they feel like they don't need to play. You can probably hear my voice. It's just disappointing. And I don't know what the NBA can do about it. I would love it if they cut down the number of games in the regular season to make each game mean more. And then if there was less games, players would obviously get more rest, so they wouldn't have an excuse to sit out the games that are still on the schedule. But I think it's just becoming more and more apparent that something needs to happen, just because I don't think yesterday was unusual. I think it happens a lot in the NBA. And one thing I feel bad about, it was all over social media yesterday, was so many people in Denver paid so much money to get into that game, and it was barely a professional game. Like, I just can't imagine. I'm sure this game was like Christmas presents or birthday presents for people that love the Nuggets or even just basketball, and they were not cheap. And then you go there, and that's the show that you get. And I would be so frustrated. I felt so bad for all these people that on social media yesterday were just posting pictures like, hey, I flew into town just for this game, or hey, I got these tickets from my kids for Christmas, and nobody's playing. And so it just hurts the sport. It's just, it's a terrible look. And really, I don't know what can be done, but it's embarrassing. It's just terrible. Kind of to spin off of that, something I think that's kind of obvious is the best two players in basketball, Jokić and Embiid, both do not want the MVP. Jokić, we talked about all his the difficulties that he went through last year with the narrative being put on him to the point where he pretty much just purposely lost the MVP last year. And then this year, he's shown no interest in it. People try and bring it up to him, and he just does not care. And I think Embiid is showing kind of the same thing. There's a game, you have to meet a minimum number of games played this year to win the MVP or any of the other awards for the NBA. And Embiid is down to, I think he can only miss 5 more games the rest of the season. And at first I thought that would maybe deter him and he would want to play just because he wants that MVP. But it's really looking more and more like what he wants is for people to say that he should have been MVP, but knowing that he's not going to make that game's played mark. It's like a no-lose situation for him if he puts up all these giant numbers in far less games, and people will say, yeah, he should have won MVP, but the NBA had that rule, and it's kind of no lose because then he gets the best of both worlds. So just another thing to look for. I almost hope that like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or someone takes it that actually really wants it. I would love it if Jokić wins it, but I just feel like if people try and make him the MVP again, he's gonna tank the rest of the season. So part of me hopes that they give it to someone else. But so I've been dancing around it, but obviously the big kind of fly in the ointment yesterday was Embiid and how he handles his schedule and really his reputation. So a big talking point this year has been how Embiid has always kind of ducked the games in Denver. There always seems to be some sort of injury or illness or something because he loves the narrative where he gets to dominate in Philadelphia and then he never comes to Denver. And it's become a thing. The national media definitely picked up on it this year. And so they were making such a big deal about how 10 days ago, Embiid even said like, hey, Jokić, I'll see you in Denver in 10 days. Like I'm going to be there. And they were making a big deal about how he was not on the injury report. Like he's going to play. And I just think he wants to control the narrative so bad that he's scared of things out of his control, which obviously playing on the road against a really good team and a really good player in Jokić is out of his control, but that's just part of sports. Like it should not scare him to the point where he's constantly avoiding all these games just to try and control the narrative. Michael Jordan has lost a ton of games and win against great players. LeBron James, same thing. They face the best, and hey, if you lose but you face the best, who cares? That's sports. That's why you should be a competitor. But he just seems to avoid anything difficult at all costs. And it's it's sad for the sport that's one of the best players in basketball when that's how he thinks. Like I said, he was not on the injury report. He did tweak his knee in the previous game, but it was not a big deal. He continued in the rest of the game. If it would have been showing any sort of injury at all, they would have put him on the injury report just to put him on there, because it's literally against the rules to not be on the injury report and then not play in a game because of a quote unquote injury. He warmed up. He was out there during warmups, and everybody said that it looked like he got tired really quick. And maybe that's the big thing, is like, he knows he's a huge, gigantic human being. And so he knows the altitude is tough. And so maybe that's the reason why he avoids it, because he just does not like running up and down the court in altitude. And I don't know, if he got that tired to fake an injury, then it is what it is. And we're never going to see him. But it's one of those things where all the talk for 2 weeks was that he was going to play, and then he comes out and warms up, and then all of a sudden it has an injury. I heard on a podcast earlier, it was reminding me, the 76ers actually came out to Colorado for their training camp and trained up in Fort Collins, just to kind of, training in altitude is great for athletes. And one night they had a team dinner, and this was right during the middle of when Coach Prime at University of Colorado was really just the talk of the sports world, really. He was just everywhere, and they had him come speak at the team dinner. And Coach Prime was just talking about competitiveness and just really being an athlete in today's world. And he specifically looked at Embiid and said, I don't want to hear any more about you ducking Jokić. Like, I hope to see you here this year in Denver. And Embiid's just sitting there nodding and like, yeah. And like, you would have thought with all the coverage that got, that could have maybe got Embiid playing, but nope. So Embiid's going to continue to pick and choose when he wants to play. And really his pattern is he will play at home. He will play on the road against bad teams. And it's really not surprising that he's putting up these giant numbers. I think almost any NBA player, if they were playing far fewer games and choosing the lesser opponents, would put up pretty big numbers. So it's just kind of funny that the narrative is out there and he just doesn't seem to care. They play Portland on Monday, and they are terrible. So I'm sure Embiid will play, and I'm sure he'll put up 60 points, and he'll think that makes him a great player. But it's getting embarrassing for him, and he's got to put it up in the playoffs. Like, everyone's saying, you're great. You are a great player. Nobody doubts that, but everyone wants to see him in the playoffs when it counts. And it's just going to be fascinating to see what happens. And I know I've rambled on this for quite a while, but I will finish up with, I think he put pressure on himself without even knowing it. I guess it's been about a year now, but when he was really campaigning for the MVP last year, and people were talking about pressure, and he said, oh, there's no pressure on me. There's pressure on other people who have 2 MVPs and no championships. That's where the real pressure comes in. And he was obviously talking about Jokić. And now he's putting himself in a position where he could be what he was talking about, of a 2-time MVP winner, and he's never even made it out of the second round. And so that's maybe part of the reason why he is avoiding the MVP again this year by sitting out some of these games. So, rant over. I promise Embiid talk is over for this episode. So I appreciate y'all listening to that, but you can tell it frustrated me. So what am I looking forward to this upcoming week? Well, the Nuggets have 2 huge games against Milwaukee and Oklahoma City. Milwaukee is one of the best teams in the East, and OKC has been one of the top teams in the West, and they've beat us twice already. So 2, I think they're going to be really fun games. Milwaukee has been playing better since they brought in their new coach, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. And Oklahoma City is just one of the best stories of the season. So we have to go on the road to play them, and it'll be a good measuring stick game again, just to see where the Nuggets' head is out and how they match up with a team that's really just playing so well and just beating everyone. So my favorite Jokism of the week, which is anything that our favorite guy Jokić does during the time since we've recorded. He was named as a all-star starter this year. So that means he got the fan vote, the coaches vote, the players vote. He got all the votes. And he was, of course, a starting front court player for the West. And I kind of love it because I think all his fellow players know that he hates the all-star game and just does not take it seriously at all. So he's actually a terrible player in the all-star game. And that's kind of why he was picked almost last year. He probably would have been picked last, but he kind of self-picked himself and just went on to LeBron's team, and LeBron didn't really have a choice, which was pretty hilarious, but at least he wasn't picked last, right? But he probably would have been picked close to last again today, even though everyone knows he's one of the best players in the world, but they also know he thinks the All-Star game is kind of a joke, and they just don't really want someone out there that's not trying. So he'll be a starter. He'll probably put in like 5 good minutes and then ask just to sit down on the bench. Now, with recommendations, I normally try and recommend something that's going to make you a better fan. Like I've talked about different podcasts or different websites, that kind of thing. I wanted to balance it out today because I know my opening segment was very negative about the state of the NBA and obviously Joel Embiid. So I wanted to balance it out, and we'll bring some laughter to my recommendation today. My wife showed me a clip of Nate Bargatze on Saturday Night Live, and it's the George Washington sketch. So if you haven't seen it already, look up SNL, Bargatze, George Washington. And it just made me laugh so much. It's like perfect Bargatze. He kind of has that deadpan humor. And I really, really enjoyed it. I've watched it multiple times. So if you're down in the dumps about the NBA too, then it'll make you smile. And then the last segment, everyone's favorite. Oh, there are other teams? That's where I force myself to talk about other teams besides the wonderful Denver Nuggets. And I want to talk about 3 different teams today. And first one I mentioned earlier, Milwaukee fired their coach. And obviously that's not unusual. Coaches get fired all the time, but this is unusual because Milwaukee has one of the best records in the NBA. And something bad must have been going on behind the scenes. Obviously the players did not get along with the coach very well. There was multiple instances where they kind of called him out in the media directly. And the worst thing that I saw was the coach was trying to make a substitution one time and took Giannis out, and Giannis did not like that. So he just stepped out of bounds, sat on the scorer's table, and then checked himself back in. And that's just kind of showing up the coach in front of the whole stadium. And I'm sure it was probably curtains for the coach since then. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. They brought in Doc Rivers, and obviously they're very talented. Their changeover from Drew Holiday to Dame Lillard has been good for the offense, bad for the defense, which was to be expected. But it'll be interesting to see. Like the players got what they wanted, so maybe that's a good thing, maybe not. The second thing I wanted to talk about is there's been some huge scoring nights lately. Luka, he scored 73. Embiid had his 70. And then Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker each scored over 60 as well. It's really interesting to see the difference in reaction in all these. Embiid was first. He had the 70-point game, and everyone was going crazy, and it was incredibly impressive. Of course, it was against the Spurs, who are terrible, but I don't care who you're playing against. Scoring 70 points in an NBA game is just it's remarkable. So obviously, everyone was loving that game, and then that very same night, Karl Anthony Towns scored over 60. But there was such a weird vibe around that game in general. He had 44 points at halftime. So people were going crazy. They're like, oh, Embiid got 70. Can Cat get 80? And I think at first his teammates were really happy. Like they were like, oh, Cat's on fire. Feed him the ball. Let's do this huge game. And then as the game went on, it just deteriorated. And you could see his teammates started resenting him almost. Like their best player is Anthony Edwards. And Anthony Edwards was refusing to shoot. He would just like passive aggressively just pass the ball every time, no matter if he was open or not. Like they were force feeding Cat, just trying to get him the ball every single time. And you would think if someone scores over 60 points that they're going to blow the other team out. Well, they were blowing the other team out, but they were just force feeding Cat every single time and like stopped playing, that they ended up losing the game. And of course, that's super awkward to celebrate a great performance because hardly anyone ever scores over 60. But the quotes after the game, just the reaction from the teammates, nobody was happy for him. Everyone was mad they lost the game. The coach was furious because they weren't playing basketball. All they were doing was just giving the ball to Cat and just stand around and be mad at him. Like it was just really, really awkward. And it's going to be interesting to see what the rest of their season goes like, because it was not good. The way they handled that, it could tear that team apart, and they've been doing so well. And so I don't know. I would almost say, like, I would not be surprised if they traded Cat, just because it's kind of obvious that he's talented, but nobody, I don't want to go as far as nobody likes him, but like, it just seems like they do not respect him. It was just such a weird game, and not quite to that level, but Devin Booker had a similar situation where he scored over 60, same night as Luka scoring 73. And so it's kind of funny how these are all bunched up together. But again, Booker's came in a loss, and it was a similar situation. Like everyone knew he was on fire, and so they started force feeding him, and then they couldn't get back into a regular basketball rhythm and ended up losing the game. And so it's just so interesting. These performances are historic, yet a couple of them are almost looked like as negatives on their team and the record, obviously, because they got a loss. But it's been really impressive to see these numbers, but at the same time, how they happen and just the game flow has been really interesting as far as just a whole more than basketball approach to it. So it'll be interesting to see if these giant numbers continue, if someone's going to score 80 or if they can pass Kobe and score 82. So it's been interesting. And then the last one is, I just want to talk and say the playoffs are going to be amazing. Both conferences have so many good teams that I really hope everyone stays healthy. In the East, Boston did just get a Porzingis injury, who's been huge for them. But hopefully he'll be okay. But I just really want everyone to be healthy, because it's going to be a dogfight in both conferences. Boston, I think, is on a level of all their own on the East. But then you get Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and then, like I said, the Knicks have been playing really well. Miami's always great. Cleveland's been playing really well. There's not going to be a bad matchup, no matter what the combination is, in probably the first round. But if like Atlanta sneaks in there or something like that, then I expect them to get blown out. But in the second round, it's just going to be the best of the best going against each other, and it's going to be so fun. And same goes for the West. Every team has been playing well that we kind of expected to play well now. Phoenix has kind of figured it out. The Clippers have been awesome. The Sacramento's been good. And then the top teams of OKC, Minnesota, and Denver look great. So I really hope we get a year where everybody stays healthy, because there always seems to be one or two big injuries that takes that away. But this year would be so fun just to watch everybody match up. So that is it for today. And we got a lot of fun stuff coming up this week and in the future for the podcast in general. We're well past the new year and heading into spring. So, of course, there's going to be some more good football talk. I got a lot of baseball ideas I want to do too. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.